Why do introverts shut down? And what is an introvert exactly anyways? And how do they differ from extroverts? Do you think that you might be an introvert? Well, today I'm going to share with you 5 signs of introversion so you can figure out if you're an introvert or not. And I'm going to talk about why introverts tend to shut down. If you're new here, welcome to my channel. And if you're returning, thanks for coming back. My name is Elizabeth Ritchie. I'm a registered clinical counselor and a certified life coach. I work with men, women, and teens to help them bust through blocks that are holding them back and help them to live more fulfilling lives. If you would like more information about what I do, you can check out my website at www.fullflightlifecoaching.com. So let's talk about what an introvert is. An introvert is a person who is somewhat reticent and more focused on their internal world, whereas an extrovert would be somebody who is more outwardly focused, someone who derives their energy from outside stimulation. So I think that would be it in a nutshell. But in reality, we don't just fall on one end, extrovert, or the other end, introvert. We're actually on a continuum. So you may hear people talk about and say, well, I think I'm an extroverted introvert. And so that's somebody who can be extroverted when the occasion calls for it, but then they need to step back and move into their introversion role and get away from stimulation for a while. So we do fall on a continuum. Now, what are the signs of being an introvert? Well, there's 5 key signs, I believe, when it comes to sort of classifying yourself, so to speak, as an introvert. So number 1, it's a big one, is you enjoy being alone. So there's some people out there that, that's not something that they seek out. They don't look for solitude and they don't look for time in silence. But for introverts, it's absolutely key to feeling good. So number 1, they seek out alone time. They like to be alone. Number 2, they tend to be insightful and reflective. So again, that's getting back to more of an internal focus, a focus on the internal world as opposed to the external world. Number 3, with an introvert, large social gatherings, lots of noise, excess stimulation, like at a carnival, fair, rock concert, that can be very off-putting after a certain amount of time for an introvert. Whereas somebody who is extroverted, they're actually going to gain energy from that situation. It's going to fire them up. But for an introvert, that kind of situation, large groups, gatherings, lots of talking, it drains their energy big time. On the whole, introverts tend, this is number 4, on the whole, introverts tend to prefer smaller groups of people, meeting and being with the smaller groups as opposed to the larger groups. And they might also have a smaller group of friends. And lastly, number 5, people might feel, if you're an introvert, you may have received feedback from people that you can be hard to get to know, maybe a little bit standoffish. Maybe, I mentioned the word reserved at the beginning. That would be another sign that you could be an introvert. So we did talk a little bit about why introverts shut down, but there's a big reason that I haven't really touched on yet, and that is to do with how people's own body makeup is. So how their body reacts to certain situations. And there's a study, a school of thought out there that places people in different areas in terms of their arousal levels. So there's some people who are already naturally very aroused and very aware of what's going on in their environment. So they're super alert and they're always looking out for things and scanning the environment. And that is physically and mentally tiring. Whereas there's other people who have a lower set point for arousal. So you can place them in the rock concert or on the sidelines at the Indy 500 or whatever, and there's tons of noise and crowds and everything's going off, and they don't get overly aroused. They kind of maintain. So you've got the ones that are easily aroused and the ones that are not easily aroused, and then most people kind of fit somewhere in the middle. But introverts definitely would fall in that area of being highly aroused by that outside stimulation. So why is this important to know? Well, I think it's important to know because if you're in a relationship with an introvert versus an extrovert, if you're working with someone who's more introverted, it's a behavioral personality trait, really, that is important to recognize and support. Because often throughout history, I think there's been sort of an underwritten thing that there's something wrong with the person who's introverted. So because they want to be alone and they need that alone time in order to recharge their batteries. But when you think about it, back through time, we've always had different people. We've had the warriors, we've had the leaders, we've had the scholars, we've had the spiritual advisors, and they all have very different personalities, and we need all those personalities because they are strong, and together that's how we form community. So labeling someone or self-labeling yourself an introvert, it's not a bad thing. It's a strength, just as extroversion is a strength. And it doesn't mean that you're shy, and it doesn't mean that you have social anxiety. It just means that you're one of those people that needs to recharge by being alone. So it's good to know your arousal level. It's good to recognize other people who are introverts that may have those lower arousal levels, and then they need to go back off to their desk and work, or they need to go outside for a walk on their lunch break, and they don't want to eat lunch with everybody in the work cafeteria. Everyone's different, and it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with that. So I think there's great strengths in introversion and there's great strengths in extroversion, and we need to support both. Now, of course, if you're identifying as an introvert, but you also find that you do have a problem or challenges, I shouldn't say problem, but challenges with social anxiety or isolation, or you find it hard to make connections with people, then that is something different than introversion. That is something that you need to discuss with your health practitioner, with a counselor, with a coach, your GP, whatever it may be, psychologist. So you now know why introverts tend to shut down. You now know 5 signs to recognize whether you might be an introvert or know someone who's an introvert. And you know why it's important to recognize these personality traits. So if you like this video, please give it a like, hit the subscribe button, and leave a comment below, and I will see you next time.